7 hidden marks. Only the chosen have. What if I told you that God marks His chosen ones in ways that are invisible to the world but undeniable to those who carry them? What if I told you that the very things that make you feel different, misunderstood, or even isolated are actually signs that God has set you apart for something extraordinary? Would you believe it? Or would you brush it off as just another motivational speech? Here's the truth. God doesn't do ordinary. When He chooses someone, He marks them with hidden signs, signs that set them apart, prepare them for greatness, and equip them for destiny. And only the chosen carry these marks. You might be wondering, what are these marks? Do I have them? And if I do, what does it mean for my life? That's exactly what we're going to explore today. Because these marks aren't just traits or characteristics. They are divine imprints from God Himself. They are spiritual fingerprints that identify you as one of His chosen vessels. They are the signs that you're not just living an average life, but are walking in divine purpose, power, and destiny. But here's the challenge. These marks aren't always easy to recognize. In fact, they're often disguised as struggles, burdens, or even weaknesses. They're the very things that make you feel out of place, misunderstood, or even rejected. They're the things that make you question why you're different, why you don't fit in, and why you can't just live a normal life like everyone else. But once you understand these marks, once you see them for what they really are, everything changes. You realize that you're not just different, you're chosen. You're not just set apart. You're marked by God for greatness. Maybe you've always felt a deep sensitivity to God's presence, a heightened spiritual awareness that others don't seem to understand. Maybe you've been burdened with a compassion so intense that you can't help but weep for the hurting, the broken, and the lost. Maybe you've faced trials that seem too intense, too relentless, and too unfair for one person to handle. Or maybe you've experienced divine favor and open doors that you didn't deserve, opportunities that seem to fall into your lap without explanation. These aren't coincidences. These are the hidden marks of the chosen. These are the signs that God has set you apart for a purpose greater than yourself. These are the indications that you're not just living for the here and now, but are part of a divine assignment orchestrated by God Himself. And the enemy knows it. That's why he fights you so hard. That's why he tries to discourage you, distract you, and make you doubt your calling. Because he knows that if you ever realize who you are and what you carry, you'll become unstoppable. But today, that ends. Today, we're going to expose the lies, reveal the truth, and uncover the 7 hidden marks that only the chosen carry. Today, you're going to discover whether you have these marks, what they mean, and how to walk in your identity as one of God's chosen. Because once you understand these marks, you'll never see your life the same way again. You'll stop seeing your struggles as punishment and start seeing them as preparation. You'll stop feeling isolated and start realizing that God has set you apart for greatness. This isn't just about learning new information. It's about transformation. It's about awakening to your identity and stepping into your destiny. It's about understanding that God didn't make a mistake when He made you different. He didn't make a mistake when He gave you that burden, that dream, or that calling. He marked you, chose you, and set you apart because He has a purpose for your life that goes beyond anything you could imagine. But here's the question. Are you ready to find out if you're one of the chosen? Are you ready to discover the hidden marks that God has placed on your life? Because once you see them, once you recognize them, You can't go back to living an average life. You can't go back to mediocrity or complacency. You'll realize that you were created for more, chosen for greatness, and marked for destiny. So if you've ever felt different, if you've ever felt misunderstood, if you've ever wondered why you don't fit in, then this is for you, because you're not alone. You're not crazy, you're not disqualified, you're chosen. And today we're going to uncover the 7 hidden marks that prove it. Are you ready? Let's find out if you have them. The first hidden sign is a distinctive spiritual sensitivity. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt the atmosphere shift? Have you ever been able to sense tension, peace, or even spiritual heaviness without anyone saying a word? Do you feel an unexplainable burden to pray, even when you don't know why or for whom? If you've experienced this, then you carry the first hidden mark of the chosen, a distinctive spiritual sensitivity. This isn't just intuition or a gut feeling. It's a supernatural sensitivity to the spiritual realm that God gives only to those He has set apart. This mark is a divine gift, but it often feels more like a burden. You feel things deeply. You discern things that others overlook. You carry a heightened awareness of God's presence, His voice, and His leading. This is why you might feel uncomfortable in certain environments, why your spirit feels uneasy around certain people, and why you sometimes feel overwhelmed by the weight of the world's brokenness. It's because God has given you spiritual radar, a discernment that cuts through the natural and sees into the spiritual. Look at Samuel. Even as a young boy, Samuel was marked by this sensitivity. He heard God's voice calling him in the middle of the night, even when Eli, the priest, couldn't discern it. 1 Samuel 3. This wasn't just because Samuel was special. It was because he was chosen. God had marked him as a prophet, set apart to hear His voice and speak His words to a nation. But notice this. Samuel didn't immediately recognize God's voice. He needed guidance from Eli to understand that it was God speaking. This is important because one of the challenges of this mark is learning to distinguish between your own thoughts, the enemy's lies, and God's voice. Spiritual sensitivity without discernment can lead to confusion, fear, or even spiritual burnout. That's why it's crucial to cultivate intimacy with God, to spend time in His Word, and to learn how to recognize His voice. Jesus said, "My sheep listen to my voice. I know them, and they follow me." John 10:27. If you're marked with spiritual sensitivity, then you must also develop spiritual discernment. But here's the challenge. Not everyone will understand your sensitivity. Some people might think you're overly emotional, too intense, or even dramatic. They won't understand why you feel things so deeply, or why you seem to carry burdens that aren't yours. But don't let their misunderstanding make you doubt your mark. God gave you this sensitivity for a reason. He marked you as an intercessor, a prophetic voice, or a spiritual watchman. He set you apart to stand in the gap, to discern the times, and to respond to His promptings. Elijah experienced this sensitivity. He could hear God's voice, not in the wind, earthquake, or fire, but in the gentle whisper. 1 Kings 19:12. This required spiritual sensitivity, the ability to quiet his spirit and discern God's voice amidst the chaos. If you're marked with this sensitivity, then you must learn to tune out the noise of the world, the distractions of life, and the voices of doubt. You must learn to cultivate stillness, to wait on God, and to trust His whisper, even when it doesn't make sense. But this sensitivity isn't just about hearing God's voice. It's also about feeling His heart. You feel His grief over sin, His compassion for the hurting, and His love for the lost. You're moved to intercede, to weep, and to pray with a depth that others can't understand. This is why you often feel burdened, heavy, or even exhausted, because you're carrying spiritual weights that God has entrusted to you. But don't let this discourage you. These burdens are invitations to partner with God in prayer, to stand in the gap, and to release His will on earth as it is in heaven. If you carry this mark, then embrace it. Don't run from it, deny it, or try to numb it. Cultivate your sensitivity through prayer, worship, and the Word. Surround yourself with people who understand your calling, who can pray with you and support you. And most importantly, steward this sensitivity with humility and obedience, because God didn't give you this gift to elevate yourself. He gave it to you to serve His kingdom. But spiritual sensitivity isn't the only mark, because when God chooses you, He also places His heart within you, a heart that feels His compassion, a heart that breaks for what breaks His, and a heart that is moved to action. And that leads us to the next hidden mark. The second hidden sign is an uncommon compassion and empathy. Have you ever felt someone else's pain so deeply that it brought you to tears? Have you ever been overwhelmed by compassion for a stranger, moved to pray for someone you don't even know, or burdened by the suffering you see around you? If so, then you carry the second hidden mark of the chosen, an uncommon compassion and empathy. This isn't just being sensitive or emotional. It's a supernatural compassion that comes directly from God's heart, a divine burden that He places within His chosen vessels. This mark is a gift, but it often feels like a weight. You feel the pain of others as if it were your own. You carry burdens that don't belong to you. You can't ignore suffering, injustice, or brokenness, because it moves you to the core of your being. This is why you might feel overwhelmed, drained, or even heartbroken by the world's pain. It's because God has given you His heart, a heart that is full of love, compassion, and mercy. Look at Jesus. Throughout His ministry, Jesus was moved with compassion for the lost, the sick, and the broken. In Matthew 9:36 it says, "When He saw the crowds, He had compassion on them, because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd." This compassion wasn't just empathy. It was divine love that moved Him to action. It led Him to heal the sick, feed the hungry, and preach the gospel to the poor. This is why compassion is a mark of the chosen, because it compels you to act, to serve, and to love like Jesus. Nehemiah carried this mark. When he heard about the broken walls of Jerusalem, he wept, fasted, and prayed for days. Nehemiah 1:4. This wasn't just patriotism or emotional sympathy. It was divine compassion that moved him to action. Nehemiah didn't just feel the burden, he responded to it. He left his position of comfort and influence to rebuild the walls, to restore his people, and to fulfill his calling. This is how compassion works. It moves you out of your comfort zone and into your calling. But here's the challenge. Not everyone will understand your compassion. Some people will think you're too sensitive, too emotional, or even too idealistic. They won't understand why you care so much, why you can't just move on, or why you feel burdened by problems that aren't yours. But don't let their misunderstanding stop you from carrying this mark. God placed His heart within you because He trusts you to respond. He marked you as an intercessor, an advocate, or a servant leader. He chose you to bring hope, healing, and restoration to a hurting world. If you carry this mark, then don't run from it. Don't harden your heart or try to numb your compassion. Allow God to use your empathy to bring healing, comfort, and love to those who need it. Channel your compassion into action, whether through prayer, service, or advocacy. And remember, compassion is not weakness. It's a divine strength that flows from God's heart through you. But this compassion isn't the only mark. Because when God chooses you, He also refines you through trials, challenges, and tests. And that's the next hidden mark you need to recognize. The third hidden sign is a life of unusual trials and testing. Have you ever wondered why your battles are so intense? Why your struggles seem relentless? Why you face trials that feel far beyond your strength? If so, then you carry the third hidden mark of the chosen, a life of unusual trials and testing. This isn't just bad luck or coincidence. It's a divine sign that God is preparing you for greatness. Because before God elevates, He tests. Before He promotes, He proves. Before He releases you into your destiny, He refines you through the fire. This mark is perhaps the hardest to carry because it feels like pain, hardship, and suffering. It feels like betrayal, rejection, and heartbreak. It feels like doors closing, people leaving, and dreams dying. But here's the truth. These trials aren't meant to destroy you. They're meant to develop you. They're meant to strengthen your faith, build your character, and prepare you for the calling God has placed on your life. Look at Joseph. He received dreams of greatness as a young man, visions of leadership, authority, and influence, Genesis 37:5-11. But immediately after receiving these dreams, his life took a dramatic turn for the worse. He was betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused of a crime he didn't commit, and thrown into prison, Genesis 37-39. For 13 years, Joseph endured betrayal, injustice, and loneliness. Yet through it all, he held on to the dream God gave him. Why did Joseph face such intense trials? Because he was chosen. He was marked for greatness, and the enemy knew it. The devil tried to stop him, discourage him, and destroy him before he could step into his destiny. But what the enemy meant for evil, God used for good, Genesis 50:20. The very trials that were meant to break Joseph became the platform for his promotion. In a single day, he went from prisoner to prime minister of Egypt, saving his family and an entire nation from famine, Genesis 41. This is how God works. He takes what the enemy meant for evil and turns it into good. He uses the trials, the pain, and the suffering to mold you into the person you need to be for your destiny. He refines your character, purifies your motives, and strengthens your faith. Just like gold is refined by fire, you are refined by trials. And the greater the calling, the greater the testing. Look at Job. He was a righteous man, blameless before God, yet he faced unimaginable suffering. He lost his wealth, his health, and his children, all in a single day, Job 1-2. His friends accused him, his wife doubted him, and his heart was broken. Yet through it all, Job refused to curse God. He held on to his faith, his integrity, and his trust in God's sovereignty. And in the end, God restored everything Job lost, giving him double for his trouble. Job 42:10. If you carry this mark, then your trials are not in vain. Your suffering is not without purpose. Your tears, your pain, and your struggles are all part of God's refining process. He's using the very things that hurt you to heal you, strengthen you, and prepare you for greatness. He's using the betrayals to teach you forgiveness, the setbacks to teach you perseverance, and the pain to teach you compassion. Because when you've walked through the fire, you carry an anointing that can't be bought, faked, or imitated. You carry an authority that only comes from surviving the storm. But here's the challenge. You have to choose faith over fear, trust over doubt, and perseverance over giving up. You have to believe that God is with you in the fire, just as he was with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, Daniel 3. You have to trust that your trials are not the end of your story. They are the beginning of your testimony. If you carry this mark, then don't give up. Don't let the pain make you bitter. Don't let the betrayal make you hard. Don't let the suffering make you doubt God's goodness. Instead, let the trials make you stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. Let the fire refine you and bring out the gold within you. Because God doesn't waste pain. He redeems it. And what you're going through now is preparing you for where he's taking you next. But unusual trials aren't the only mark. Because when God chooses you, he also gives you supernatural resilience, the ability to rise from the ashes, to keep fighting when others would give up, and to persevere against all odds. And that's the next hidden mark you need to recognize. The fourth hidden sign is a supernatural resilience and perseverance. Have you ever wondered how you survived what was meant to break you? How you kept moving forward when others would have given up? How you found strength to rise again after every setback, every failure, and every heartbreak? If so, then you carry the fourth hidden mark of the chosen, a supernatural resilience and perseverance. This isn't just willpower, determination, or stubbornness. It's divine resilience, a strength that comes from God himself. This mark is a gift, but it often feels like a battle. It feels like falling down 7 times but getting back up 8. It feels like facing obstacles, opposition, and impossibilities, but refusing to quit. It feels like fighting battles that aren't fair, climbing mountains that are too high, and walking through valleys that are too dark. Yet somehow, you keep going. Somehow you keep believing. Somehow you keep fighting. That's because God has placed his supernatural resilience within you. Look at Paul the Apostle. He faced persecution, imprisonment, beatings, shipwrecks, and betrayals. Yet he never gave up. 2 Corinthians 11:23-28. He was stoned and left for dead, yet he got back up and continued preaching the gospel. Acts 14:19-20. He was imprisoned in chains, yet he wrote letters of encouragement and joy. How did Paul endure such relentless opposition? Because he was marked with supernatural resilience. He understood that his calling was greater than his circumstances, that his purpose was worth every sacrifice, and that his suffering was producing a glory that outweighed the pain. 2 Corinthians 4:17. This is how supernatural resilience works. It empowers you to keep moving forward, even when everything in you wants to quit. It gives you strength to stand firm, even when the storm is raging. It fuels your faith, even when you can't see the promise, and it sustains your hope, even when your heart is breaking. This resilience isn't just about surviving. It's about thriving. It's about overcoming, conquering, and achieving what others thought was impossible. Look at David. He faced giants, battles, betrayals, and even exile. Yet he never lost his faith. He kept fighting, kept worshiping, and kept trusting God's promise. This resilience was what made him a king. It wasn't his talent, his skill, or his charisma. It was his ability to rise again, to keep going, and to persevere through every trial. If you carry this mark, then you have a supernatural strength that can't be broken. You have a perseverance that defies the odds, a faith that moves mountains, and a hope that anchors your soul. You are resilient because God made you that way. And no matter what comes against you, no matter how many times you fall, you will always rise again. But supernatural resilience isn't the only mark. Because when God chooses you, He also grants you divine wisdom and revelation, insight that goes beyond human understanding, clarity that sees through confusion, and knowledge that unlocks destiny. And that's the next hidden mark you need to recognize. The fifth hidden sign is an unusual wisdom and revelation. Have you ever experienced moments of insight so profound that they seem to come from another realm? Have you ever understood complex situations with clarity that defied logic? Do you sometimes perceive truths that others can't see, or grasp ideas that seem beyond your own understanding? If so, then you carry the fifth hidden mark of the chosen, an unusual wisdom and revelation. This isn't just intelligence, intuition, or knowledge. It's divine wisdom, a supernatural insight that comes directly from the Spirit of God. This mark is a gift, but it often feels like a weight. You see things differently. You understand truths that others overlook. You perceive the spiritual implications behind natural events. This is why you might feel misunderstood, isolated, or even burdened by the knowledge you carry. It's because God has given you eyes to see, ears to hear, and a mind to comprehend divine mysteries. He's entrusted you with revelation, insight, and understanding that are meant to guide, influence, and impact His kingdom. Look at Solomon. When God asked him what he wanted, Solomon didn't ask for wealth, power, or fame. He asked for wisdom, an understanding heart to judge your people, that I may discern between good and evil. 1 Kings 3:9. Because Solomon's heart was pure, and his motives were aligned with God's will, God granted him not only wisdom, but also riches and honor. 1 Kings 3:12-13. Solomon became known as the wisest man who ever lived, his wisdom surpassing all the kings of the earth. 1 Kings 4:29-34. But this wisdom wasn't just for personal gain. It was for leadership, governance, and advancing God's kingdom. This is how divine wisdom works. It's not about knowledge or intellect. It's about spiritual insight and discernment. It's the ability to see beyond the surface, to perceive the hidden motives of the heart, and to understand the deeper truths of God's Word. It's the wisdom to make decisions that align with God's will, to solve problems that seem impossible, and to navigate complex situations with grace and integrity. It's revelation that comes through the Holy Spirit, guiding you into all truth. John 16:13. Look at Daniel. He was marked with unusual wisdom and revelation, able to interpret dreams, visions, and divine mysteries. Daniel 1:17. When King Nebuchadnezzar demanded the interpretation of his dream and threatened to kill all the wise men of Babylon, Daniel sought God's mercy and received divine revelation of the dream and its meaning. Daniel 2:17-19. This wisdom not only saved lives but also positioned Daniel in a place of influence and authority. But notice this. Daniel didn't seek wisdom for his own glory. He sought it for God's purpose. He gave all the credit to God, saying, "There is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries." Daniel 2:28. If you carry this mark, then God has given you divine wisdom and revelation for a purpose. It's not to elevate yourself, but to advance His kingdom. It's not to prove how smart you are, but to solve problems, influence leaders, and reveal God's will. But here's the challenge. Not everyone will understand your wisdom. Some people will envy it, others will doubt it, and some will even try to discredit it. But don't let their misunderstanding stop you from walking in your calling. God marked you with this wisdom because He trusts you to use it for His glory. But here's another challenge. Divine wisdom must be stewarded with humility. The moment you become prideful or self-righteous about your wisdom, you risk losing it. Solomon started his reign with humility and dependence on God, but he eventually became arrogant, compromised his values, and fell into idolatry. Wisdom without humility leads to downfall. That's why James 3:17 says, "But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, reasonable, full of mercy and good fruits, unwavering, without hypocrisy." If you carry this mark, then walk in humility, integrity, and obedience. But unusual wisdom isn't the only mark. Because when God chooses you, He also grants you supernatural favor, open doors that no man can shut, divine connections that defy logic, and opportunities that only God could orchestrate. And that's the next hidden mark you need to recognize. The sixth hidden sign is a supernatural favor and open doors. Have you ever experienced doors opening that you didn't even knock on? Have you found yourself in rooms you didn't qualify for, receiving opportunities you didn't earn, or gaining access to places you never imagined? If so, then you carry the sixth hidden mark of the chosen, a supernatural favor and open doors. This isn't luck, coincidence, or privilege. It's divine favor, God's hand orchestrating events, aligning people, and positioning you for purpose. This mark is a blessing, but it often feels like a mystery. Things seem to fall into place without explanation. People who don't even know you are moved to help you, support you, or promote you. Opportunities come out of nowhere, and connections are made effortlessly. This is why you might feel unqualified, undeserving, or even overwhelmed by the doors God opens. It's because these doors weren't opened by human hands. They were opened by God's sovereignty. Look at Esther. She was an orphan, an exile, and a foreigner in Persia, with no status, no wealth, and no influence. Yet God granted her favor with King Xerxes, who chose her to be queen out of all the women in the kingdom. Esther 2:17. This wasn't just about beauty or charm. It was divine positioning for a purpose. Because when Haman plotted to annihilate the Jewish people, Esther was in the perfect position to intervene. But notice this. Esther didn't seek the throne. She didn't manipulate her way into power. God placed her there for such a time as this. Esther 4:14. This is how divine favor works. It positions you strategically, even in places where you feel out of place, unqualified, or unprepared. It grants you access to people of influence, authority, and power, not for your own glory, but for God's purpose. This favor is supernatural. It can't be explained by logic, experience, or qualifications. It's the same favor that Joseph experienced when he rose from a slave in Potiphar's house to the second in command in Egypt. Genesis 41:41. But here's the challenge. Favor comes with responsibility. When God grants you favor, He expects you to steward it with humility, integrity, and purpose. Esther didn't use her position for personal gain. She used it to save her people. Joseph didn't use his power for revenge. He used it to provide for his family and a nation. If God has given you favor, then ask yourself, how can I use this influence, this position, and this opportunity to advance God's kingdom? And here's another challenge. Favor attracts envy and opposition. Not everyone will celebrate your success, your promotion, or your opportunities. Just as Joseph's brothers envied his favor and Haman resented Esther's influence. You will face jealousy, criticism, and even sabotage. But don't let this discourage you. The enemy only attacks what threatens him. If you're facing opposition, it's because your favor is a threat to the kingdom of darkness. But supernatural favor isn't the only mark. Because when God chooses you, He also gives you unshakable faith, the ability to trust Him in the impossible, to believe in His promises, and to step out in boldness. And that's the next hidden mark you need to recognize. The seventh hidden sign is an unshakable faith and trust in God. Have you ever faced circumstances that seemed impossible, yet you couldn't stop believing that God would come through? Have you ever held on to a promise from God, even when everything around you screamed that it was over? Do you find yourself trusting God's character, even when you can't trace His hand? If so, then you carry the seventh hidden mark of the chosen, an unshakable faith and trust in God. This isn't blind optimism or wishful thinking. It's supernatural faith, a trust in God's sovereignty, goodness, and faithfulness that defies circumstances. This mark is a powerful gift, but it often feels like a test. It feels like standing in front of a Red Sea with no way out. It feels like walking around Jericho's walls day after day, seeing no change. It feels like waiting on a promise that seems delayed, impossible, or even dead. Yet somehow you keep believing. Somehow you keep trusting. Somehow you keep walking by faith and not by sight. 2 Corinthians 5:7. That's because God has placed His supernatural faith within you. Look at Abraham. He was marked by this unshakable faith when God promised him a son, even though he was old and his wife Sarah was barren. Genesis 17:15-19. Decades passed, and nothing happened. Yet the Bible says, against all hope, Abraham in hope believed. Romans 4:18. He didn't waver in unbelief but was fully persuaded that God had the power to do what He had promised. Romans 4:20-21. And because of his faith, Abraham became the father of many nations, and his descendants became as numerous as the stars in the sky. Genesis 15:5. This is how unshakable faith works. It believes even when there's no evidence. It hopes even when there's no reason. It trusts even when the promise seems impossible. This faith is not based on circumstances, logic, or human understanding. It's based on God's character, His word, and His faithfulness. It's the faith that moves mountains, parts seas, and brings dead things to life. It's the faith that endures persecution, trials, and suffering because it sees the unseen and believes the impossible. Look at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were marked by this unshakable faith when they stood before King Nebuchadnezzar, refusing to bow down to his golden image. Daniel 3:16-18. They declared, "The God we serve is able to deliver us, but even if He does not, we will not serve your gods." This is faith that defies fear, faith that stands firm under pressure, and faith that trusts God's sovereignty no matter the outcome. And because of their faith, God walked with them through the fiery furnace, delivering them without a single burn. Daniel 3:24-27. If you carry this mark, then you have an unshakable faith that anchors you in every storm, sustains you through every trial, and empowers you to walk in the impossible. You have the faith to speak to mountains, to pray bold prayers, and to believe for miracles. But here's the challenge. Unshakable faith is forged in the fire. It's tested in the wilderness, proven in the storm, and strengthened through delay. That's why you face battles that seem impossible, trials that seem unending, and situations that seem hopeless. It's because your faith is being refined, purified, and fortified. But here's another challenge. Not everyone will understand your faith. Some people will call you crazy, unrealistic, or even foolish. They won't understand why you keep believing when everything says give up. They won't understand why you keep praying when nothing changes. They won't understand why you keep hoping when the promise seems dead. But don't let their doubt shake your faith. God marked you with this faith because He trusts you to believe. He chose you to stand in the gap, to intercede for the impossible, and to declare His promises in the face of adversity. If you carry this mark, then don't let fear, doubt, or delay steal your faith. Hold on to God's promises, trust His timing, and believe His word. Walk by faith, not by sight. Speak life, not death. Declare victory, not defeat. Because God honors faith, and without faith, it is impossible to please Him. Hebrews 11:6. But unshakable faith isn't the only mark. Because when God chooses you, He also calls you to live differently, to walk in purpose, and to fulfill your destiny. And that's what we'll explore in the next chapter. How to embrace and live with these hidden marks. So now you know the 7 hidden marks of the chosen: a distinctive spiritual sensitivity, an uncommon compassion and empathy, a life of unusual trials and testing, a supernatural resilience and perseverance, an unusual wisdom and revelation, a supernatural favor and open doors, and an unshakable faith and trust in God. If you've recognized these marks in your life, then you're not just different, you're chosen. But now that you know, how do you live with these marks? How do you embrace them, steward them, and fulfill your destiny as one of God's chosen? 1. Accepting your identity as chosen. The first step is to accept your identity as chosen. This means letting go of doubt, insecurity, and comparison. It means embracing who God made you to be, without apology or compromise. It means understanding that being chosen isn't about being better. It's about being set apart for a purpose. You were created for a reason, marked for greatness, and called to fulfill God's will on earth. Accepting this identity means walking in confidence, not arrogance, and living with purpose, not complacency. 2. Developing spiritual maturity and discernment. If you carry these marks, then you need to grow in spiritual maturity and discernment. This means cultivating intimacy with God through prayer, worship, and the Word. It means seeking wisdom, revelation, and understanding from the Holy Spirit. It means walking in humility, obedience, and integrity. It means discerning God's voice from the enemy's lies, testing every spirit, and aligning every decision with God's will. Spiritual maturity empowers you to steward your marks with wisdom, courage, and responsibility. 3. Walking in purpose with humility and obedience. God didn't choose you to sit on the sidelines. He chose you to fulfill His purpose. This means walking in obedience, even when it's uncomfortable, inconvenient, or costly. It means serving others with humility, love, and compassion. It means using your gifts, influence, and opportunities to advance God's kingdom, not your own agenda. Walking in purpose requires boldness, faith, and perseverance. It requires trusting God's timing, submitting to His process, and surrendering to His will. 4. Overcoming fear and doubt. Being chosen doesn't mean you won't face fear, doubt, or insecurity. It means you overcome them through faith, courage, and trust in God. It means confronting your fears with truth, silencing your doubts with God's promises and standing firm in your identity. It means walking by faith, not by sight, and trusting that God's plans for you are good, even when you can't see the outcome. 5. Inspiring and impacting others. Finally, if you carry these marks, then you are called to inspire, impact, and influence others. You are called to be a light in the darkness, a voice of hope, and a vessel of God's love. Your journey isn't just about you. It's about the people you're called to reach, the lives you're destined to change, and the legacy you're meant to leave behind. Because only the chosen have these marks. And if you have them, then God has chosen you for something great. Now, it's time to live it out. We've just uncovered 7 hidden marks that only the chosen carry: a distinctive spiritual sensitivity, an uncommon compassion and empathy, a life of unusual trials and testing, a supernatural resilience and perseverance, an unusual wisdom and revelation, a supernatural favor and open doors, and an unshakable faith and trust in God. These marks are not coincidences. They are divine indicators that God has set you apart for greatness, purpose, and destiny. They are the signs that you are not just existing, you are chosen. But now that you know, the question is, what will you do with this revelation? Will you ignore these marks, dismiss them as mere coincidences, or run from the calling they signify? Or will you rise up, embrace your identity as one of God's chosen, and step boldly into your purpose? Because here's the truth: knowing you're chosen is not enough. Recognizing these marks is just the beginning. It's what you do with them that matters. It's how you live, how you serve, and how you fulfill your destiny that counts. These marks are not about you. They're about God's purpose for your life. They're about the people you're called to reach, the lives you're destined to impact, and the legacy you're meant to leave behind. They're about fulfilling God's will on earth and advancing His kingdom. This is why the enemy fights you so hard. This is why you face battles, trials, and opposition that seem overwhelming. Because the enemy is terrified of your potential, your calling, and your purpose. He knows that if you ever realize who you are and what you carry, you'll become unstoppable. But today you've been awakened to the truth. You've recognized the marks that set you apart. You've understood the calling that defines you. And now, it's time to step into your destiny with faith, courage, and obedience. It's time to stop running from your calling and start walking in purpose. It's time to stop letting fear, doubt, and insecurity hold you back. Because God didn't choose you to live in mediocrity. He chose you for greatness. He marked you for a reason, anointed you for a purpose, and set you apart for destiny. But here's the challenge. Greatness isn't easy. It comes with sacrifice, discipline, and perseverance. It requires faith in the face of fear, courage in the face of adversity, and obedience in the face of uncertainty. It demands resilience, humility, and integrity. It means fighting battles, overcoming obstacles, and walking through valleys that seem too deep. It means facing giants that seem too big, walls that seem too high, and storms that seem too fierce. But here's the good news. God didn't just call you. He equipped you. He didn't just choose you. He empowered you. He didn't just mark you. He walks with you. You are not alone. The same God who called you is the same God who goes before you, fights for you, and empowers you to fulfill your destiny. The same God who marked you is the same God who strengthens you, sustains you, and supplies all your needs according to His riches in glory. The same God who chose you is the same God who promised to never leave you nor forsake you. If God is for you, who can be against you? Romans 8:31. So, what will you choose? Will you shrink back in fear, or will you step forward in faith? Will you settle for comfort, or will you pursue your calling? Will you bury your dreams, or will you believe in the impossible? Because God is waiting for your answer. He's waiting for you to say yes to the call, yes to the purpose, and yes to the destiny He has prepared for you. He's waiting for you to take the first step, even when you can't see the whole path. He's waiting for you to trust Him, to follow Him, and to obey Him. And if you choose to say yes, then get ready, because God is about to do something extraordinary in your life. He's about to open doors that no man can shut. He's about to make a way where there seems to be no way. He's about to use you in ways you never imagined, impacting lives, influencing nations, and advancing His kingdom. He's about to reveal His glory through you, His power in you, and His love around you. But here's the final truth. Your calling isn't just about you. It's about the people you're called to reach, the generations you're destined to impact, and the kingdom you're meant to advance. Your obedience to your calling will unlock someone else's breakthrough. Your faithfulness to your purpose will inspire others to pursue theirs. Your courage to step into greatness will create a ripple effect that echoes into eternity. So if you've recognized these 7 hidden marks in your life, then it's time to stop running from your calling. It's time to stop hiding from your purpose. It's time to stop letting fear, doubt, and insecurity hold you back. It's time to rise up, embrace your identity as one of God's chosen, and walk boldly into your destiny. Because you weren't created to live an ordinary life. You were created for greatness. You were chosen, set apart, and anointed for such a time as this. Your past doesn't disqualify you. God's grace qualifies you. Your weaknesses don't limit you. God's power works through them. Your fears don't define you. God's calling defines you. So step out of your comfort zone, embrace your calling, pursue your purpose. Fulfill your destiny, because only the chosen have these marks. And if you have them, then God has chosen you for something great. Now, it's time to live it out. If this message has impacted you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below and let us know how this revelation has changed your perspective. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss more powerful teachings like this. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey. Until next time, keep your eyes on Jesus, your heart anchored in faith, and your steps aligned with purpose. God bless you.